Once, in a great kingdom where the rivers were wide and the sun shone like melted gold, there lived a king named Jambo. He was powerful, feared, and admired. He had warriors who would fight until their last breath, gold that could fill 100 rooms, and a palace that touched the sky. But most of all, he had wives. 100 of them. One for every wish, every desire, every moment of loneliness. The people called him the King of 100 Hearts. But in his heart, there was only emptiness. When Jambo was young, he had loved a girl named Natasha. She was the daughter of a simple fisherman, her laughter like the sound of water touching the shore. They had promised each other a life of love, a life of walking side by side, never apart. But when Jambo became king, he had to marry princesses from other lands, noble women whose fathers would bring him armies and riches. And so, he let Natasha go, telling himself that a king must think of his people before his heart. Years passed. Wives filled the palace. They wore the finest silks, adorned themselves with beads and gold. But they were strangers to him. Each wife desired his attention, yet none could touch his soul. He would sit at the grand feast, surrounded by beauty, yet feel alone. He would wake up in his golden bed, but his dreams were empty. One day, while walking through the village in disguise, he saw an old woman selling fish by the river. Her face was wrinkled, her hands rough, but her eyes were the same as before. It was Natasha. The girl he had once loved. The girl he had abandoned. Natasha, he whispered, his voice shaking like an old tree in the wind. She looked at him, long and deep, as if searching for the boy she had once known. Then she smiled, not in sadness, not in anger, but in knowing. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing her head. "How grand you have become. And you? Did you marry? Were you happy?" he asked, though he feared the answer. "I married a fisherman," she said. "We had little, but we had laughter. He is gone now, but he left me with children who love me, grandchildren who run to me when they see me. My house is small, but it is full. My life is simple, but it is whole." Jambo felt something deep inside him break. He had 100 wives, but had never known love. He had gold, yet he had never known warmth. He had a kingdom, yet he had never known home. That night, he returned to his palace. His wives waited for him, dressed in the finest clothes, their faces painted, their hands soft. But he looked at them and saw only what he had lost. He saw the life that could have been, the laughter he had traded for power, the warmth he had thrown away for duty. From that day, he spoke less, smiled less. His people saw their king grow old before his time. His wife still dressed in gold, but he no longer saw them. His palace was still grand, but he no longer felt at home. The food before him was rich, but it no longer had taste. His people whispered about him, saying, "The king has everything, yet he has nothing." One evening, he sat alone on his throne, watching the sun set beyond the hills. He thought of Natasha's laughter, of her simple joy, of the love she had found in a life that was humble but full. He thought of his 100 wives, of his golden palace, of his lonely heart. As the days passed, his regret grew heavier. He began wandering through the palace at night, passing by the chambers of his wives. Some whispered among themselves, some sat alone in silence. None truly loved him. None knew him, just as he did not know them. The walls of his palace, once filled with music and dance, now felt like a prison. One day, he summoned the elders, the wisest men of the land. "Tell me," he said, "what is the worth of a king who has everything but joy? What is the meaning of power when the heart is empty?" The elders looked at him, their faces solemn. One of them, an old man with silver hair, spoke. "A king without love is a man without a shadow. He stands tall, but he is not whole. He rules the land, but he is lost within himself. The heart of a man is not fed by gold, nor by power, nor by the beauty of many women. The heart of a man is fed by love, and love alone." Jambo closed his eyes, breathing deeply. He knew the truth now, but it was too late. Love had passed him by like the wind. He could not go back to Natosha, could not relive the days of his youth. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. As the years passed, Jambo's hair turned grey, his steps grew slower. His 100 wives still lived in the palace, but he no longer sought them. He spent his days by the river, watching the fishermen cast their nets, listening to the laughter of children playing on the shore. Sometimes, he thought he heard Natosha's voice in the wind. Sometimes, he imagined what life could have been, if only he had chosen love over duty. And when the time came for him to leave this world, he did not ask to be surrounded by gold or warriors or wives. He asked only to be buried by the river, where Natosha had once laughed, where life had once felt real. The elders say that even now, on quiet nights, when the moon is full, you can hear the sigh of a lonely king carried on the wind. And if you listen closely, you will know that power is nothing without love, and riches are dust without joy. And so the wind carries his sorrow. And so the rivers whisper his name. And so his story is told, not as a warning, but as a truth. A man without love is a man without life. And a king with everything is nothing if his heart is empty.